So all of you out there in podcast land, you deserving listeners, you all have, I'm guessing, had the experience where you're looking at that shelf in your kitchen and you have all those coffee mugs, and the coffee mug shelf is just overflowing with this. This is what just happened to me recently. I just realized I had way too many coffee mugs. You know, it's not likely I'm going to have 50 people over to my house to have coffee at any given time. And I'm looking at this shelf and I'm just thinking, okay, I need to get rid of some coffee mugs. And I'm looking at one and I'm like, oh, I can't get rid of that one. That one's sentimental to me. It has the Space Needle on it. And I remember buying that at Salmon Days in Issaquah. I can't get rid of that one. I got that one because I gave money to a podcast and they sent that to me in the mail. It's a special mug for me. And this is the thinking that essentially leads to my problem on this shelf. Well, we all know that we can all run into problems like this. You know, your garage fills up, your closet fills up with stuff, your house fills up with stuff, your inbox in your email fills up with stuff. We have too many. The problem with today in first world countries anyways, we just have just mounds and mounds of stuff, and we can all relate to that. Well, for some people, as you all know, since there was a reality show about this, it can be taken to a pathological level where they have what we call in our industry hoarding disorder. And this is a very serious issue. It's way beyond the mug situation that I was describing. People are in their houses and they can't even get to the kitchen. They can't get to the bathroom. Their functioning is impacted a great deal, and they're really suffering. And the common way that we approach this is we have an intervention. We go into their house and we force them to throw away all their stuff. And empirically, this has been found to not only not work because soon they have it all back in their house after the intervention is over, but it even can sometimes become worse. And so we need, as a society and as a field of psychotherapy, to really start looking at this in a more intelligent way and in a way that's effective. And from what I understand, there's not a lot of effective therapies out there and a lot of misconceptions. Well, as a person at the tip of the spear who was trying to raise awareness about hoarding, trying to help these people in a holistic way, who have had on the podcast before, Dr. Jennifer Sampson, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks. Hi, Kirk.
Hi. So it is Hoarding Awareness Week soon.
It is next Monday.
Yeah.
The 24th of October.
The 24th October 2016.
Yeah.
Some people will be listening to this episode like years from now. So, but you'll probably have this every year, right?
Yeah, every single year.
In October.
In October.
And this is for Washington State, and your institute, your foundation is in Tacoma, Washington.
That's correct. The Hoarding Project.
The Hoarding Project. Well, I want to talk about that and get to know more about that. Before we do that, let's introduce the podcast. This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm chair of the Couple and Family Therapy program at Antioch University, Seattle, and I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. Jennifer, who are you?
I am Jennifer Sampson. I am associate chair of the Couples and Family Therapy program at Antioch University, and I am executive director of the Hoarding Project, which is a nonprofit organization aimed at research, treatment, and education around hoarding disorder.
And you're also a licensed marriage and family therapist.
I am.
With a private practice in Tacoma, Washington.
That's right.
So why do we need a week for awareness regarding hoarding?
Yeah, hoarding disorder is a pretty brand new mental health disorder as of the last DSM in 2013. So it is a new diagnosis that most people don't know much about. And this is a diagnosis that studies can project affects up to 1 in 20 people in the population.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's like 345,000 people in our state, in Washington State.
Yeah, I can think of people that I know who I would say have a low-grade version of it.
Yeah.
Where it seems out of control, where it seems, it's one thing about having, like I said, the mugs thing, It's another thing when I don't want to be specific, but it's another thing when, it financially or just there's a threshold that I think, in my mind anyway, where it crosses the line into concerning.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's really about functionality.
Okay.
Yeah. So when somebody's home becomes kind of like storage space, right?
Yeah.
And they can't function the way that, or use their home in the way that they want to or should be able to, like cooking in their kitchen, sleeping in their bedroom, that kind of stuff.
Right. Because people will have stacks and stacks of stuff on their stove.
Sure.
In their fridge, outside of their fridge. They can't. So it gets to that level. Can you tell us more about what these sorts of situations might look like?
Sure. So it kind of depends. Hoarding is, people kind of talk about it as like an on-off switch, like somebody hoards or they don't, but it really, like many things, is like a spectrum of behaviors.
Yeah.
So it can all, I mean, we all know what clutter is. You know, our houses get a little bit messy. Mine is right now because I've been running around and not been home much. So stuff gets disorganized and like laid around the house. Yeah. But if we're not organizing clutter and it keeps adding on to itself, or bringing more things in, and we're having a hard time getting rid of them, like you talked about with the mugs, you know, there's lots of different reasons for keeping things. Everybody's got their own reason. Things are coming in at a higher rate than they are going out, and these piles of stuff start getting in our way in terms of functioning. We may be running into some hoarding issues.
Yeah. And what kind of things have you seen where people's lives are negatively impacted, or where their functioning is being impacted specifically?
Well, it depends.
I mean, in my head, is it always the same? Is it always, because I've seen houses where the insides are filled with stuff and there's this very tight corridor.
Yeah, like little pathways
in between with you can't see the ground because there's stuff on the ground too. So you're essentially walking through a completely filled warehouse of various, whether it's magazines or boxes or whatever.
Clothes or art supplies.
Yeah. Or garbage.
Coffee cups.
Sometimes, yeah. I knew someone as a kid, coffee cups. I knew someone as a kid who, I think they just kept boxes in this one room. It was just like cardboard boxes.
Sure.
And it was I'll never forget it. It was this valley from one door to the other door. You couldn't see the floor, and you just had to kind of crawl through this room, and that's all it was. Like there was. I don't think there was anything in the boxes, but is that the common typical presentation?
It can be, but it's not always. So hoarding can look a lot of different ways. So some people, I mean, hoarding has to start somewhere. So it can start in just, one specific room and kind of just start piling on top of each other. Yeah. Some hoarding homes that I've gone into have perfectly clear pathways, and it's actually no safety concerns, but they do have, the main characteristics of hoarding. They excessively acquire. They have a hard time getting rid of things, and some areas of their home they can't use because of so much stuff. Yeah, and it's impacting functioning somehow. Yeah, and then sometimes they look like the houses we see on TV. Like there's no pathways; they're just walking on stuff. Yeah. There might be squalor or infestations or rodents, things in the home.
Yeah. Do you ever get referred cases where it's mainly squalor and not hoarding? Because there's no squalor disorder, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, so I was just imagining you would get referrals from, they're not hoarding, but they're not cleaning their cats or their houses, or like there's moldy stuff everywhere and it's a health concern. Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but there's not a lot of help out for those people.
Yeah, those are the very, very toughest cases. We do get some of those referrals because we're pretty well networked in with adult protective services or any of the emergency responders. That kind of stuff. Code
an emergency
enforcement.
responder comes to an EMT comes to a home because someone had a heart attack or something.
Sure. Yeah.
And they see this house and they think this is this is not a typical situation. And they're like, well, who do we call? Mm-hmm. Well, there's nobody. Well, there's the hoarding people. They go into homes and they help, so they probably call you because of that.
Yeah, and even in those situations when we know that there's some serious health hazards going in, we probably won't initially go in, but we'll make referrals to different companies around the area that could go in, who are equipped with, personal protective equipment to be able to go in and do an initial assessment.
Hazmat stuff.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. 'Cause it's dangerous sometimes.
Yeah. Why? Because of like germs,
infestation. So if there's like rodents, rodents can carry diseases, hantavirus, parasites, things like that.
Yeah.
Sometimes in those really bad situations, we can be dealing with like plumbing not working. So there's like human waste or animal waste inside the homes, rotting food. Things can get pretty bad pretty quickly, actually.
Yeah. It's just interesting as I hear these voices in my head saying things like, man, these people are dirty. Someone's got to, or this person's hoarding. They got to clean that shit up, because we all deal with a little bit of clutter, like you're saying, or a little bit of hoarding, in the broader definition. We all deal with filth in our house at times. I have cats and dogs, and on a daily basis, there's some poo or pee related, event.
Yeah. And
so if someone came over to my house right after one of these poo or pee related events, they'd be like, we're like 2% down the squalor, spectrum here. So we all deal with that. And so when we see it in its extreme, we just think like, we just need to yell at these people, we just need to like say, hey, clean or get rid of some stuff or, but it's really different than that, right?
Yeah, I think that's a really very, very important point. I think that the disconnect happens when we fail to recognize that hoarding disorder is a mental health issue. And so there's a lot of overlapping pieces that feed into how this disorder develops that, it's not just an easy decision.
Right.
Just pick up your stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
they would do
organized.
that. They would do that if they could.
Right.
Yeah.
So I want to get more into that in a second.
All right.
But we need to take a break in a second. But before we do those seconds, I want to ask you again to repeat what people can do if they want to participate next week in the Hoarding Awareness Week.
So at the start of the week, we're going to be kicking off a declutter challenge.
And this is October
24th, 2016. Well, on Facebook, really.
Oh.
So you can participate from wherever you are. And so basically where this idea came from is that I got home from a trip the other week and I came home and my place was just a disaster. There was so much stuff all over. Yeah. And so I got in a purging mood and I went through my closets and I just got a ton of stuff to donate and loaded up my car. And I was like, I'm going to talk about this during Hoarding Awareness Week because I was noticing that some things were really hard for me to let go of. Yeah. Some things were easy.
Like what?
The hardest thing for me to let go of was like empty boxes that things I bought have come in that were like really good quality boxes. Like my Apple computer came in a really nice quality box.
I was going to say, Apple has the best boxes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that empty box from my MacBook that I bought like 2 years ago was sitting in my closet, taking up space with nothing in it, and me going, but it's such a good box. Like, I don't want to get rid of it. Yeah. Or like this nice dress I bought once, or this handbag I bought once, or whatever. These empty boxes are filling up my closet. And I like had the hardest time going, I'm just going to recycle these. And so my declutter challenge is that I'm going to like blog about this on our Facebook page
on Monday
and post pictures of the stuff that I got rid of. And then I'm going to challenge certain people to do it. And my goal is that those people will then start decluttering a little bit, talk about their experience, and then challenge some more people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And that is a way to make it personal or visceral, a connection for everyone.
To raise awareness and to also, in the spirit of kind of decluttering and kind of gaining back people's use of their homes, do that.
Yeah.
So that's on Monday. We'll be doing that throughout the week. And then that Friday, the 28th, we are hosting our third annual conference, all-day conference on hoarding disorder in Tukwila, just south of Seattle.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. And this is October
28th,
2016, Tukwila. And you're having your conference Thursday or
Friday?
Thursday.
Just Friday.
Just Friday. Sorry.
Just Friday the 28th.
Friday the 28th. Mm-hmm. And this is a conference. You have a number of classes. And speakers.
We have 12 different breakout sessions, 3 different keynote speakers.
Wow.
We have mental
Are
health
you one of them?
professionals. I'm one of them. Yep. I'm going to be talking about hoarding cleanouts and a new protocol or intervention we've developed called Safety Day.
Okay.
And we have a ton of other speakers, adult protective services, code enforcement,
So this is mainly
home
for
inspectors,
clinicians, or could it be for...
anybody. We have attendees who are there on a personal level, professional level. We have a multitude of different fields that are represented: housing, social workers, professional organizers.
So this is the 4th year you've done this week.
Yeah, this is the 4th year we've done this week.
And have actual hoarders come to the conference before?
Yeah, we have people who hoard. We have their family members who come. They can all attend it. We have special sessions that are geared more towards hoarding on a personal level.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on Facebook on Monday, I will do the mug thing.
I'll tag you in. I'll challenge you to do the decluttering.
Yeah. I'll have to make some tough choices about the mugs. But before we get into, I want to talk about the treatment. I want to talk about some other things with you. But before we do that, let's take a break, okay?
Sounds great.
All right, we're back. So, Dr. Sampson, tell me about the treatment. But before you do that, tell me, how did you get interested in this? Are you a clutter person?
I'm not that cluttery.
Are you annoyed with clutter?
I do, but I also think that is like a sort of like a factor that's related to that. This is what I do for my living, right?
Yeah.
So,
but were you annoyed with clutter before? Like, how did you get interested in this?
well, I got interested in it because of reality television.
Oh.
So there's nothing good like and inspirational about
So
research.
we could just as well be talking about like fashion or
We could.
or like American Idol right now or something.
Right, which probably at that time was like at the time I came up with this brilliant idea was also on my radar. So
Yeah.
it was just like the mood I was in that day, I guess.
Isn't it interesting how we just sort of, you always expect, it's like, well, both my parents were hoarders and, I couldn't stand it. And then so I decided when I was 5 years old that one day I would become a doctor of hoarding.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, I just was watching reality TV one day and I thought, and you were in doctoral
Yeah.
program and you're like, oh, I need a dissertation idea.
I just needed an idea for a class that was coming up. I had to do like a mini study.
Oh, a mini study.
Yeah,
And you're like, oh, okay. How about hoarding?
Yes.
And then it just blossomed
It
into
really
your
did.
dissertation, and then a specialty of treatment, and then your post-grad work, and then you started the okay.
Yeah.
So you don't have a particular backstory regarding hoarding.
No, I mean, now as an adult, I can see like my grandmother definitely hoarded.
Okay.
And but I never really thought of it growing up. I mean, we didn't have language for it then, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so we'd go over to my dad's mom's house and like her basement's just filled with quilt stuff.
Yeah. I kind of feel like back in the day, it was like, that was par for the course.
Yeah.
Like the older you were and the longer you lived in a house, you just had a bunch of weird old junk.
Yeah.
Because my grandparents, or is this your Filipino
No,
grandparents?
my other side,
Your
my
wife?
Norwegian ones.
So yeah, my Japanese grandparents had this huge house for 5 kids and 2 adults. And when all the kids moved out, they kept the same house and filled in all the extra space with all this. But I loved it because it was like a museum. Yeah. I even found it was in Spokane, this house in Spokane, and it gets hot in Spokane. That similar system of hot air that comes up from Texas, you know what I mean? And just in Minnesota where you're from. And I opened up one drawer and there was a melted golf ball.
What?
A golf ball had half melted. Like it's made out of rubber bands, I think, in the middle. And I just thought, like, how many summers in this attic has this golf ball been sitting here to melt? And how hot? Yeah, anyway. But yeah, there'd be old, like, movie posters and furniture and pictures and little trinkets, and little items from the 20s.
Yeah.
And so, I didn't think of it as something of a problem. I just thought it was like,
That's just grandma and grandpa.
grandma and grandpa.
That's how it is.
This is their history.
Yeah.
They got a bunch of stuff. But I feel like today we don't really think of it that way.
No, we don't. There was a shift, and I think reality TV had a lot to do with it, kind of raising awareness about this problem that's out there that a lot of people face. Like I said, up to 1 in 5 people. Like if those projections are right, that's like on par with one of the most common mental health issues out there, like up there with depression. Right.
So tell us about the mental health elements of it, because on one level, again, some people are saying, oh, they just need help getting rid of their stuff. But what we've defined it in the DSM is a mental illness on par with schizophrenia or major depression or something. So what makes it a mental illness?
So in order to be qualified as a DSM mental illness, we need to think about like the 4 major parts of the definition. One is that there's an excessive acquisition of stuff. Okay. So bringing in more things than there's space, need, or resources for. But not everybody who hoards excessively acquires. So it's actually just a specifier of the diagnosis. So that's not a required criteria. But most people who hoard do excessively acquire stuff.
Meaning they might produce stuff?
Like they buy stuff or collect free things.
But what's non-acquisition hoarding?
So if we aren't excessively acquiring, we're acquiring at just like a standard level of consumption. It's like if I need groceries this week, I'll go out and buy groceries and I'll consume them. Yeah. And that's just like standard acquisition. Or passive acquisition, like mail. Like I'm not doing anything to bring the mail in, but it just comes in anyway.
People will hoard that.
Yeah, they won't let go of it. Okay. So the first major like requirement of the diagnosis is that people have a difficulty letting go of items because they have a perceived need to want to save them.
Perceived need to want to save them.
To save the items. So like, you talked about with like the mugs, right? Yeah. I can't let go of this mug. It reminds me of salmon days in Issaquah, like that kind of stuff. Right. So people want to hang on to stuff because they have a reason for wanting to save it. And these reasons are varied. Like we all have reasons to hang on to stuff. Right. I liked my boxes because they were good quality and maybe I could put something in them someday.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Whenever I come across a good box, I think it's from college, honestly, because when you're in college, you have a lot of little things and nowhere to put anything, and you need like a good shoebox. Yeah. Like a good shoebox. Like I could open my cabinet right now, pull out one of my college. It's like a laminated shoebox. It's like the best kind of shoebox. Yeah. And I put batteries in there. And so, yeah. But when you get older, you don't necessarily need those boxes anymore.
No, I have all the bins I could ever want. Like I have plenty of stuff, but I was like the other day looking for stuff to put in these boxes because I did not want to get rid of them. Yeah. So perceived need to want to save items. Okay. And when you think about getting rid of them, then like increased distress because of that.
Okay. So like a lot of distress or...
Enough that I'm not going to get rid of it, right?
Okay, so much distress. What does that look like, distress?
People like talk about increased feelings of anxiety, stress.
Like they get agitated.
Yeah.
Like if someone came after me and said, look, you got to get rid of 2 of these mugs. I'd be like, okay, yeah, you're right. And and I'd say, okay. And no distress. But other people...
Yeah. So,
like
I mean,
increased irritability. No, you can't. Sure. And like a desperation. Like,
sure. And we all have items like that, right? Like that we have, like it would be really difficult to get rid of, like family heirlooms or a particular, shirt that you had autographed at a concert once or, whatever. Like we have these like particular things that are important to us. Yeah. So just imagine like the most important thing to you and the feeling you would have if someone was forcing you to get rid of it against your will. Yeah. And then like spread that across to many, many things that are filling up your home. Like that's kind of the experience that people who hoard have.
So what's the final criteria? But I want to get back to why does this happen to people? But
so excessive acquisition, difficulty discarding, and then clutter. So there's so much stuff in their home that it's preventing them from using their spaces for the intended purposes. Okay. And the DSM actually says if there are any spaces that are clear in the home, it's only because of the intervention of a third party, like a loved one or a cleaning company or whomever. Okay. If this person was left to their own agenda, they'd fill up the spaces. Okay. And that it's, of course, affecting some level of functioning
Okay. So the person is like, hey, free empty room, like more space to fill it up with stuff.
Kinda, yeah. Like stuff would just kind of spread into it.
And then I'm guessing the fourth criteria is
that functioning piece.
Functioning, as with all DSM.
As with all DSM, right.
So sidebar, do people ever have super lots of space or lots of money and basically never run out of space for their stuff?
They can. Like I've worked with people who have bought second, third, fourth homes because they ran out of space for their stuff.
Why don't they just buy like a warehouse or a garage or something?
They fill it up. I worked with one woman it was the woman in when I was in Minnesota, and she had 78 storage units lining the corridor of the interstate from Minnesota to Louisiana.
78 little like 20 by 20 units filled to the brim with all their stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how does that fit into the disorder? Like, say she's her house is fine, because everything's in a storage unit.
Yeah.
Does that
probably not?
That doesn't count. Because it's not getting into the way of her functioning.
Yeah, so I think we have to be good diagnosticians, right? Like, if we don't want to just take a snapshot of any given time. We have to do a thorough assessment. So in those assessments, we're asking about any additional storage units or things like that.
So you might get, in your opinion, if she had 78 storage units filled to the brim and she had a lot of distress about letting go of things, but her house was normal because, again, she had enough money to buy all this, then you're saying maybe qualify because...
Yeah, because you can demonstrate that behavior elsewhere. Right. I also have a hard time imagining that a case like that was that severe
without the house being full
would not have a house that's also full.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because the storage units are like the overflow from the house.
Right.
That's interesting. I mean, because to me, the spirit behind the diagnosis is whatever generates the anxiety as the disorder and not necessarily the presentation. I'm just that kind of guy anyway when it comes to diagnosing. I know other people are different, but if someone was essentially suffering to the degree that they needed to buy 75 or 78, storage units, then I would consider considering them as having a mental illness. The other thing here is what if someone didn't have any distress about letting go of things, but they just calmly love to collect, like, say they love bicycles or something, those take up a lot of space, and they're just like, nah, yeah, sure, you get rid of them, but I don't know, I just really, really love all these old Schwinn's and da-da-da-da. Does that count as hoarding disorder?
So if they really didn't have a hard time getting rid of them, no, right? Like that's kind of the cornerstone of it, that I'm hanging on to stuff because I really believe that I'm going to need this someday for some reason.
So they could kind of clutter their house so someone could have a spouse that has completely cluttered their house with a bunch of stuff. And every once in a while they're like, let's get rid of everything. And then they fill their house up with it. But so it's just sort of a decision, a lifestyle or something that they're doing.
It can be. Like, I think it's more rare that happens. Okay. But like, for instance, we worked with a senior housing project last year. And we found that in about half of the cases that were referred into us that were hoarding cases, like in quotations and hoarding cases, only about half of them were actual hoarding. Like the rest were situational. Like the senior had a surgery and, their household chores got the best of them. But when it came down to it, they actually didn't have a hard time getting rid of stuff.
Interesting.
So we can intervene way differently in those cases. We can kind of move quickly through getting the home back to order without so much mental health support. Right. But in hoarding cases, there's a lot of distress about doing that. So we have to do it differently.
Yeah. So let's get into the treatment in a second. But what's the cause of this? Like, I'm thinking trauma. I'm thinking, genetics of mental illness. I'm thinking, grief and loss. I don't know, psychosis. I don't know. I'm thinking lots of different things.
All of it. Like, it's really kind of this perfect storm of a lot of different things. It is genetic. People who have first-degree relatives who hoard are more likely to hoard themselves. Okay. And so this is like a nature and a nurture thing. So it's like people are genetically predisposed to this disorder. Okay. People are also genetically predisposed to parts of hoarding, like indecisiveness. Like that can be a hereditary trait too. We know that it's a co-occurring diagnosis. So 93% of the time it'll show up next to another diagnosis, like depression, anxiety, PTSD, bipolar disorder, something like that.
Yeah.
Trauma is super involved as well.
Yeah.
We know trauma affects the brain. Right. And people who hoard report higher levels of having experienced like traumatic or stressful life events.
Just any old traumatic or is it particular traumas?
I think it depends on person to person. So there are some like the big T traumas, like rape, assault, like that kind of stuff, like death of a child, like that kind of thing. Yeah. But also like a series of like small T traumas throughout life, like abusive relationships growing up, or just really difficult things like infidelity, divorce, stuff like that. People that, are experiencing that.
Yeah, we are a materialistic culture. Yeah. There's a lot of messages and literal gain to have possessions. What if you need this one thing? Mm-hmm. Boy, that's going to come in usefulness at some point. Or I could probably sell that, And when we are sort of chronically afraid, there are various different ways of coping with that. You could become a drug addict. You could drink a lot. You could jump out of airplanes. You could focus on romance and sex as a distraction. And I'm guessing you could also focus on hoarding things as like, okay, I've got all my things. Everything's okay. I'm okay. No one's going to threaten me and take my stuff away. I've got everything I need. I know where everything is. I could just imagine that being...
I think it can be a comfort thing. I think where a lot of like the clutter and accumulation can happen is because it's so distressing for people to get rid of things, they just avoid doing it. So it just piles up and piles up. And then we've all been at a place where we've looked at our home at some level and been like, oh, this place is a disaster. I need to do something about it. I don't even know where to start because it's just so much.
Right. Interesting. Mm-hmm. So it sort of just becomes overwhelming to
completely overwhelming
even begin the process.
I've never met one person who hoards, as like defensive as people can be and say that, that they would deny it, that are like, yeah, I really like how my house is looking right now.
Oh, really? So they'll all just say, yeah, I don't like.
Yeah, this is never their plan. They have plans to do with all of this stuff, but they haven't had a chance to or can't access it.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that's very, very important for us to understand about hoarding is that there's some pretty important cognitive differences, like brain differences, in brains of people who hoard compared to, the general population.
Like what? More amygdala action? Kinda.
So there's executive functioning stuff that gets involved. So like memory, decision-making, prioritizing tasks, like taking a project and breaking it down into the different tasks that need to get done. It's
ADHD.
Harder. Yeah, kind of. Inattentiveness, like that kind of stuff. Indecisiveness. Impulse control is tougher. Uh-huh. The parts of the brain that regulate that have a harder time, like course correcting. Like when we're trying to break a habit. Yeah. The part of the brain that helps us do that doesn't work as well.
Right.
Or it's tougher to make that change in this population.
Interesting.
And then this other part that I just learned about is called the salience network. It's part of it's linked in with like the limbic system, and it's the part of the brain that like points out that things are important to us. Mm-hmm. So this is what comes into play and how we can kind of explain how people who can live in hoarding situations for a long time and not recognize that like this is problematic. We've learned that salience network piece that helps us point out things that we need to be paying attention to, it's under functioning in the brains of people who hoard. And then when we have them start making decisions about like some of their possessions, that part of the brain goes into overdrive and starts thinking that everything is important. And so it makes it very, very difficult to
can't discriminate.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's take a break, but when we get back, let's talk about that defensiveness you mentioned and the treatment, okay?
Yeah.
So we're back. Jen, tell me, how do people react? Tell me a typical story here. You get a referral, you're in the house. Like, what does this look like in general?
So let's say that, let's just say somebody calls in for a self-referral, and we can talk about other ways that calls come in too and stuff. Yeah. But someone's determined that, they have a problem with hoarding. They have a hard time getting rid of things, or even just cluttering. Like some people don't even wouldn't associate the term hoarding with them because they don't look like TV, which is fair. A lot of people who hoard don't look like TV.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Most people who hoard don't look like TV. TV is just a very small...
the
most extreme version. So that's an important message, I think, that most hoarding does not look like what we see on television.
So it's less stuff.
Less stuff, and not the garbage and the squalor that we see in a lot of situations.
So some people might call you and say, my kitchen's fine, my living room's fine, but I have 2 rooms filled to the brim of just a bunch of junk that I'm pretty sure do not need to be there.
But I can't use these. It's more like I can't use these spaces, and I have a really hard time getting rid of stuff. I need some help.
Interesting.
So we're doing a safety day.
Would those people qualify for the DSM diagnosis or? Okay.
Yeah. So for instance, we're doing a safety day next week, and this home we're doing had their kitchen's in perfect condition. They've been working on it with an organizer. And I think even before the organizer came in, they kept their kitchen really...
So this isn't part of Hoarding Awareness Week. This is
it is part of Hoarding Awareness Week, but it's not an open event. We're we sponsor a safety day once a year and bring in coordinate this big event do a donated clean out.
Oh, it's a donated clean out for a client who is asking for help.
Yeah, who's been working with us for a while, and then we go in and bring their home to safety.
Okay, so you got to back up here. So someone comes in, they're like, I got, I'm not as bad as the TV, but I have some problems. And then I'm guessing you assess them. Do you assess them?
So we'll refer to one of the therapists. So a lot of our Antioch students, not a lot of them, but some of the Antioch students do their internship with the Hoarding Project.
Okay.
So we'll refer to one of them.
So they do a full
mental health
intake and specific questions around hoarding, I'm guessing. Okay.
And so they meet for a few times. Right off the bat, we talk with them about the importance of doing a home visit. We like to do that within the first 4 to 6 weeks, barring any major safety concerns that we're having.
I'm guessing there's a lot of, it's up to you. We're not going to rush to your house right now. We're not going to tell anyone. There's no intervention.
Yes.
This is all at your pace.
Yes.
You're here to, it's collaboration.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so important because I think that rushing in and putting that pressure is just so stressful for people. And the goal really is to help join with our clients, to connect with them, to build that trust.
Do people ever come and you assess them and they're like, I don't need your help. I don't need this.
Sure.
Don't ever call me.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they'll call and want help, but then when we actually attempt to work with them and help, we get a lot of pushback. Some people just aren't ready to work, and that's true for any mental health thing, right?
Yeah, they're just not ready.
Yeah.
Okay. So then in that 4 to 6 weeks, they're just coming to your office.
They're coming to the office. Most of the therapy happens in the office, in our Tacoma office.
And it's focused on all aspects of the person, if they have anxiety or depression or PTSD.
Yeah. So we really teach a lot of, because it's a co-occurring condition. So we teach a lot of diagnosing and treatment plan building around how to prioritize what's the most important thing here. Right. So safety is always first, of course.
Okay. Meaning that if their house presents an unsafe situation, you want to address that right away because they could die.
Yeah. If they were coming in and saying I have rotting food in my refrigerator that's making my whole house smell, that's something we would really want to address right away.
What other kind of unsafety?
Infestations. I have mice.
Yeah.
And they're all over my house.
Gas stoves that you can't get access to or something. It just seems like.
Yeah. And clients usually don't come and talk about that right away, right? Like, so it's not usually till like the home visit that we see, okay, so this is a problem, right? This gas stove, with paper stacked on it, like we need to address this and make sure it's safe.
Do people ever fix the problem, so to speak, or recover enough that you don't need a home visit?
Like in that 4 to 6 weeks?
Yeah.
I mean, typically no. Like if they're coming, I mean, if clutter was just the issue, people can address clutter.
Do people ever come in with a low grade?
Yeah, totally.
And they're just like wanting some extra motivation to get on it? Yeah,
which is awesome. Like that's the best, right? Because then it's not a safety issue. Because if it's a safety issue, we need to deal with that before we can actually start therapy.
Okay.
So in situations...
Well, that's sort of a self-imposed ethic, though. I mean, that's not necessarily your responsibility, right?
Well, I mean, what we've found is that we've left clients alone when there are like some safety concerns, like we need 3-foot pathways through the house. We have to be able to get, functionality of the kitchen. And clients just aren't able to make that progress when they're like living in all of it, like that intensity.
So in,
it's like crisis mode constantly,
crisis,
right?
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like living in it, and making progress in the other areas just isn't that effective.
I see.
So we try to
they probably can't sleep well. They're in a constant state of distress.
Yeah. People sleep on piles on their bed, or their bed's so full of stuff that they're sleeping in the recliner or the floor or whatever. Right. Yeah. Okay. So it's really stressful.
So personal, individual therapy, group therapy?
We have support groups,
but it's mainly individual therapy,
or family
therapy. Mm-hmm. So you'll suggest bringing in family members.
Yep. If family members can be there and be good supports, we want them, especially right up front, to be able to support them. Okay. But hoarding also affects families in really negative ways. Yeah. And so, because we work with family therapists, our interns and our therapists are particularly adept at helping like heal family relationships. Right. Around this issue, and so that's really
it's
awesome.
4 to 6 weeks of weekly therapy, or
weekly, to like prep them for like find out what's going on, do some basic like mindfulness, like self-soothing kinds of stuff to help calm stress. Anxiety is super prevalent in this population. Then
so that
do the
when
home
they
visit.
Do have that distress activated, they have tools to reduce their distress.
You got it.
Okay.
Yeah. So then we do the home visit, determine if there's any safety concerns that we want to address.
Do you do this?
We train the interns to do it.
You don't do it anymore?
I still do it.
Oh.
Because I work with hoarding clients too.
Okay.
And so we go in, do the home visit. If there's any specific safety concerns, we try to make a plan to take care of them. Yeah. Hopefully they won't be too difficult. Usually for self-referrals, things are pretty manageable. Like we can do it in like a few hours or a day, like something like that. Yeah. And once that's in place, then we can work on the mental health stuff. So that might be focusing on whatever's the primary diagnosis at that point: depression, anxiety, PTSD, alongside hoarding disorder. We kind of piece together treatment that way. Interesting.
So at this point, the police and the fire department and adult services, not police, but the various different other people, they're not involved yet.
No. So if we're talking about we can talk about different levels of hoarding. And so 1 through 5, 1, no problem, 5 being stuff we see on TV. Yeah. Stuff becomes starting to be a hoarding problem around level 3. Yeah. Where functional stuff is cut off.
So we're describing a 3 right now.
Yeah, 3. So
and you never have to involve outside parties.
And we want to involve, of course, as minimally as possible.
And a lot of success with this?
It's slow moving progress, I think, because it's, a lot of complex stuff, a lot of trauma and harder stuff to work through. So
the home visit after 4 to 6 weeks is just an assessment of safety. And then you go back to the office to do your therapy and to prep for. So only safety has been addressed.
Only safety.
There's no decluttering. There's no getting rid of it.
As much as possible. On those days, we're really just trying to hit those safety markers.
So you're moving real slow.
Moving really slow. And so we use this tool called the Uniform Inspection Checklist. You can find that online, and it just basically lays out what general codes or inspections require for a home to be quote unquote safe.
Okay. So then more therapy. Then what's next? And is this all manualized therapy?
Not kind of. It's unique to each person, really.
Oh, okay.
But this is a general process we take.
Okay.
So once we have that, like they are coming to us because hoarding is an issue for them.
Yeah.
So in an ideal situation, we like to work alongside collaboratively with like a professional organizer who can go in and help kind of do working sessions with them to continue.
Professional organizer.
Yeah.
So someone who helps me organize my mugs.
Uh-huh.
Interesting.
Yep.
Tips on how to organize, and I'm guessing a bedside manner that helps you to do it.
Yeah. And they help like not just with like the physical labor part of it. So they're not just like a cleaning person who comes in and does it for you.
Yeah.
A good organizer is trained in the area of hoarding, and they also will help with the decision-making process, kind of building up those skills and helping build systems. Like for mail, for instance, when mail comes into the house, here's what you do with it and how to manage it. Like they'll teach those skills.
Yeah. I there's very few things I really love about myself. And one of them is when I get the mail, I immediately deal with it. I bring it into the kitchen. I have a system.
Yeah.
And I lay it all out, and I open one thing at a time, and I just create this pile of recycle. And then if I get a bill, I pay it like right in that second.
That's good.
If it's a absentee ballot, I vote right then and there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because I've gotten to this point now where it gives me so much satisfaction to cross things off the list that I can't wait to cross things off the list.
Yeah.
So
that's a really good example, because I don't do that, and it takes me 3 days, and now I've got a big stack of mail, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And if I might sell the model, which doesn't sound like I need to, is you're going to eventually have to vote. Mm-hmm. And every time you look at and go, oh, I got to vote, that's like 2 seconds you've wasted and a little bit of stress you've put yourself through. Whereas if you just did it right as soon as you got it, if that's possible, then you've saved yourself all that annoyance and that self-esteem problems and like the stress of it all. And
it's very logical and makes sense. Here's how my thought process works and what happens in the long run when I think this way. And I think a lot of people do it probably like this, is I get my ballot or like the voter pamphlet, and I'm like, I want to read this and make informed choices. Yeah. So I'm going to do this when I've got more time, and I set it over here. Yeah. And then it gets piled under my pile of mail. Yeah. And then it's election day, and I don't have time to read it. Yeah. And then I just fill it out really fast, and then I'm stressed and mad at myself. Yeah.
Just go to the Stranger website and just get the recommendations.
It's a great idea. I'll do that this year.
From the Stranger, and they'll tell you exactly who to vote for. I'm not even joking. Sometimes I just do that. I just figure, well, someone else looked at this and they've made a decision. Okay. So more therapy. So we're talking about the three numbers here. And so then what? Do you actually go back? So you have a personal organizer there in the house that's not a therapist.
Yeah, they're not a therapist. And sometimes we're able to like send another one of our therapists alongside, whether it's the client's therapist or another one of them, to serve in like a stress management function. Okay. So what we found with cleanouts in particular is it raises anxiety so much that it actually can be more traumatizing for the client than helpful in the long run. Right. So they're not processing anything rationally.
Right. I mean, I'm sure you consider it this, but it creates its own form of PTSD, essentially. Yeah. You know, like, you describe that distress that's inherent, and when that a clean out, so to speak, is threatened, their distress goes up. And so having things leave their house is associated with terror. Yeah,
because they're processing it in that emotionally flooded state.
Right. It's sort of like, for me, I didn't care about needles, but I had a needle situation with a doctor, and my body just had a complete freak out, even though my brain was like, it's just a freaking needle, who cares? And then from then on, and then the next time I had a needle, I'm like, well, it's just a needle, but my body remembered the previous time, and I had another freak out, and then it just got worse and worse and worse, like every time I saw a needle, to the point where I was avoiding getting certain medical treatments because of the thought that maybe there's a needle. cognitively, I'm like, needles are fine, you know, but my body did not like it. So, and that's a reality of trauma and the way the brain works that, you know, we need to take into account that, you know, it sounds like you guys do take it.
That's exactly right. And that based in that like theory or framework around thinking about trauma, that's how we developed the idea of safety day, like really taking more of a trauma informed approach to doing cleanouts. And we're having a lot of good success with it on the ground.
Great.
Yeah.
Meaning that, okay, client, we've talked about distress level. You know, let's remember our mindfulness and our deep breathing and our going to our happy place or grounding or whatever. And what's your number now? How you feeling? Well, you guys are in my house, so I'm feeling about a 7. Okay, well, let's take some time.
Yep.
We're not going to do anything. You know, lower your number. Deep breathing, yoga, dancing, whatever.
Go on a walk.
Xbox, whatever floats your boat. What number are you now? Okay, I'm a 2. Okay, so let's move forward. And, you know, 10 minutes later, how's your number? I'm doing okay. Oh, okay, you know,
that's exactly it. Okay. That's what we do. So when in these like level 3 situations, we try to have stress management there to support that kind of process. Okay. For like a level 5, if we're working and it's like a safety day where we're having to do like a more focused intervention to get the home safe. We do that like just at a like more intense level. So we're doing like a month of prep work, like intense prep work, kind of coordinating the day. On that day, we have a stress management team who's there to work with the person. And then we work with them on transitioning afterwards. So
and family members and stuff too, maybe?
If they're totally on board, then they can be there.
Do you ever determine this family member is going to be a problem?
Yes, and they're not allowed to come on those days. We've run into major problems with angry family members.
Who want to come,
and then just
don't seem to be supportive.
Cause problems on the day. And then it aggravates the client and then the day becomes traumatizing for the client. So the whole goal on those days is keep client under emotionally flooded threshold so things don't get traumatizing for them.
Interesting. Okay. So then the 4s and the 5s, they present more, they might be forced to do it.
Yeah, they're the ones more that we're getting called in by family members or outside agencies.
And like how agencies, government agencies?
Yeah, like adult protective services or housing inspections, things like that.
Can they force people to do your therapy?
No, but we are working with like housing programs to develop like eviction diversion programs. So rather than someone failing their inspection and just moving straight into the eviction process, which properties have every legal right to do.
Wow, talk about traumatizing.
Right? Yeah, they've got this stuff and now they're under crisis to get out of the house. And if they get evicted from like senior housing or if they are getting any housing vouchers, they're way more likely to be homeless after this. Like it's bad. So we work with them to, if it's a hoarding situation, to develop, you know, longer term plans to help the residents stay in their home and then learn and develop skills so they can continue to pass inspection.
Wow. So the client has an incentive. It's just like, well, I'd like you all to go away.
Yeah.
But if I don't let Dr. Sampson in my house to help me, I'm going to be evicted, which is worse. So Dr. Sampson.
So it's basically harm reduction a lot of times. Like, how can we teach this individual how to pass inspection?
Oh. Yeah. So you're not saying complete clutterless.
No.
You're talking about how can you pass the inspection?
Because that's the like shift in thinking that we need to get like inspectors, like anyone in like these authority positions to really realize. As long as the home is passing inspection, it's none of our business how this person's living.
Right.
I can have 8,000, mugs, empty boxes in my house as long as, the EMTs can get in and out with 3-foot pathways or whatever, right?
Government, get out of my house.
Yeah.
Kind of a thing.
See, walk in, do your inspection, I pass.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So that's a different kind of client. That's someone that's not necessarily on board with the idea that they have a problem.
Yeah, but just want to stay in their home. Like we can develop plans around that. Ideally, we get to work with them. They're raising insight. They're doing behavioral changes.
Right.
But a lot of clients are not like that.
Right. Really? A
Yeah.
lot of clients aren't like that.
Sure.
Like most clients aren't like most of your 4s and 5s.
The higher the level of hoarding, the less willing people are to like go through treatment, the more ingrained behaviors are.
Is that a characterological thing at that point? Is that like a lack of insight kind of deal?
It can be. I think insight, if we're talking about true lack of insight, it's like a true no understanding that this is a problem.
Yeah. What are you talking about? This is fine.
This is fine. So then in those situations, if people really don't have insight, we may be talking about more serious mental health issues like psychosis, things like that.
Yeah.
But likely when people like don't have insight, it's like more likely not wanting to admit that there's a problem.
But they
there's
do.
Shame.
But deep down.
But probably like
They
if
know.
you deep down,
Okay.
So yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So with the 4s and 5s, that's their motivation often.
Yeah. So we want to find out what their motivation is.
But the same program, 4 to 6 weeks, home visit, for just safety only.
Usually it's a little different with those. Sometimes we're called right in and say like, we need your help because this person just failed their inspection. Now we need to help.
So it's a rushed process.
Yeah. So then we kind of go more into safety day mode, which is like meet the person, try to like join
at their house or
usually.
Okay.
Try to join with them, build trust, and then prep them for what's going to happen.
Do they see you as a arm of the government?
Not typically. That's why I think human service professionals are a lot softer in their approach. And I think if we can work well collaboratively with like the hard hands of it, like code enforcement or the inspectors, we can kind of work together to both get our goal, which is to help this person like emotional and psychological well-being and get them to stay in their home by meeting.
How long does it take before they're up to snuff?
Well, I mean, the goal is to get them to pass inspection,
right.
As soon as we can. It's usually ideally like a month to work with them to it.
So that's strange. It's like the harder cases have to go faster because of their circumstances.
Yeah, because they're like, endangering people in the home or around the home. Like if it's an apartment building, even I get calls from like the downtown condos in Seattle, on the 35th floor, someone's hoarding and it endangers everyone around them and below them. Right.
Does that ever happen? Does the floor give way?
It can.
Wow.
Yeah. I've worked with professionals who have fallen through floors in homes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that has to be a quick turnaround and then like a follow-up kind of a thing to kind of keep to sustain.
That's the important part because safety day is really not solving anything. It's like putting a Band-Aid over the problem, right? So it's not creating any sustainable change.
So ongoing mental health help around whatever co-occurring and then also stress management.
And making a plan to maintain and to like continue the progress because no decision making really has been made at this point.
Right.
No like really major discarding about like important stuff to them. That kind of stuff.
It's probably like addiction where it's like you don't just get sober. You
don't just get rid of the beer. Right.
You got to keep going to
you have to like go through the process.
Does that language ever get incorporated like sobriety of hoarding or something?
People can not so much, but we do make that like a similar metaphor, right? Like
relapses, I've relapsed. I ended up buying a bunch of junk and putting it in my house.
Yeah. Like relapse recidivism. If we don't address the mental health piece and we don't like transition to longer term care after a safety day or a clean out, for sure, like right back where we started. There's no question about it.
So at this point, you are one of the only human beings on the planet in the history of the planet that knows about this human problem that is affecting 1 in 5 people and how to treat it holistically and effectively, evidence-based.
There's a good pocket of researchers who are very focused on like treatment and
a small pocket.
Like
you probably know all of them.
Yeah. And they're doing a great job of that.
How many are you? Like 10 people?
I'd say roughly.
Yeah.
And then there's a person in Dr. Michael Tompkins in San Francisco who's doing work on harm reduction. We're the only group doing focused work around like specific clean outs as intervention and safety days. How do we apply a trauma-informed approach to doing cleanouts because we have to do them sometimes.
Yeah.
We would like to avoid them altogether because they're traumatizing.
Yeah.
But if we have to do them, how do we do them best?
Do you sleep well at night knowing you're going to be the Freud of hoarding?
I don't think about it that way, but
You will be.
it's helpful to think that maybe people will do cleanouts differently because of the work we're doing.
Materialism is only getting worse. The amount of junk available is worse. The cheap availability of Amazon bought stuff is worse. I can only imagine it's going to be worse in the near future, and there will be a growing awareness and a growing treatment of it thanks to you and your friends, and people will be doing more research, and they'll be talking about the Samsonian model of therapy. And that's pretty cool. You're the Freud of hoarding.
One of our board members has a great idea that we want to start promoting, like, how that like in casinos they do responsible gambling.
Yeah.
We want to be able to do responsible shopping.
Yeah. Where do you like at the mall or something?
I don't know, like, or on like partner with Amazon or something like that, to just, it would go against them. Like, but I mean, online shopping and the convenience of it is a major problem for people who hoard.
Oh, is it?
Or like the home shopping network, like that kind of stuff. Major problem.
Amazon, Seattle-based Bezos guy. I wonder if they might be interested in being socially responsible and partnering somehow.
Yeah. That would be really like an ideal situation.
Like, their computers know when you are buying too much stuff, and they could just, your face could pop up on the computer and say, yeah, just wagging your finger. Interesting. Well, any final words? So the week Hoarding Awareness, regardless of what year you're in, it's probably in the middle of October, but in 2016, the Facebook thing is October
24th
on Monday. And then October 28th, Friday,
is the conference.
In Tukwila, which is a fun word to say. It's a fun litmus test to see if someone is a local or not. The Puyallup, Cedro-Woolley,
Issaquah.
Well, yeah, Issaquah. All those different fun Native American words and places confound non-locals, and Tukwila is one of them. And so the conference is there, Tukwila, and you have a number of keynote speakers, a number of different breakout groups, and it's for clients, clinicians, and anyone who's interested.
Yeah. And you can you can find information on the website, thehoardingproject.org.
And if you also want treatment, do people ever contact you from out of state for help?
Yeah. So thanks for bringing that up. We do phone consultations or video consultations as well for professionals, for individuals who hoard, for their family members. So they can talk with one of our specialized staff members on the phone for an hour, and we can do consultations that way.
I'm guessing this has already happened, but like in other cities, you probably have like burgeoning experts who you've worked with to train so that they can become, a lot of clinicians listen to this podcast. If you're in New York City,
right,
you might, if you want, be one of the only people who's trained in an evidence-based treatment of hoarding. And if 1 in 5 people are suffering from this, you could build an entire practice.
And we do go out and do training. So if there are agencies around the country that want to bring in more training for hoarding, we can come in and do that. Like one of our staff members, one of our graduates from Antioch, is actually in Wisconsin this week doing some training for their mental health staff out there.
Cool. Who's that?
Leslie Shapiro.
Oh yeah, Leslie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us out there. Please take care of yourself and your family members. And if you're having an issue with hoarding, have some self-compassion and seek safe and at your pace consultation from the Hoarding Project. Take care of yourself because you deserve it.